Yes, I think we're recording. You know, after doing, I think this is episode 100 and something. I've forgotten. Maybe 140?
It's definitely over 100.
It's definitely over 100. I've lost count.
Yeah.
You'd think I'd know how to do this.
Nope.
Oh, shit, I actually forgot to do something.
Speaking of.
Keep talking. How about you introduce this episode of the podcast? I'm sick of doing it.
Okay. Hey you, and welcome to That Chapter Podcast. What else do you say? I don't know how to do it. This is hard. This is a hard job, man. Well done. Kudos to you, sir.
Okay, that's why I do it. Alrighty then. As Keith so eloquently put it, you are currently listening to the latest episode, or oldest, or some episode anyway, of the That Chapter podcast. I'm joined by, there's a reason he's the co-host, not the host. Keith. He's sitting across from me. He's wearing a baseball cap that says Herschel.
Yeah, man. It's a good company. A Canadian company.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, Keith.
Yeah.
Your Canadian fans are going to be chomping at the bit. Very good. So yeah, folks, it's the summertime. We got a big old episode for you today about a lesser known serial killer.
It's about, I've never heard of it before. And
Me neither.
it's a good one. It's a really good one.
This is a good one. It's a bit of a long one. So
I feel we say all the episodes are really good. I feel like we're losing a bit of credibility.
Well, no, because every episode is really good, Keith, and I'm a believer.
At some
you
point
beat
we
yourself
should
up.
just introduce and be like, you know what, this episode's not great, but maybe next week.
This,
you know?
Yeah, this episode's kind of shit, guys. This is an episode you can probably skip, actually. But no, this episode is good. And Keith, you know what? You just gotta fake it till you make it.
That's true.
Every episode is the bomb.
Yep.
It's the tits. It's the bee's knees, folks. This is the best thing you're ever gonna see or listen to. So yeah, well, this episode is though, no lie, no word of a lie. This is a story of an Englishman. His name is what Keith says when he sees my brother, John Haigh. Yeah, also known as the acid bath murderer. Well, wonder why he's called that.
It's dark.
You know, I was looking at a picture of this guy. He's pretty well documented for a killer who was active in the 40s. There's a lot of pictures of him.
There is, yeah.
He was known as a charmer. He's an interesting looking fella because he sort of looks like if Walt Disney and Hitler had a baby. Yeah. That's honestly the best way to describe how John Haigh looks.
That's fucking spot on. That's exactly how he looks.
All right, let's get into it. John George Haigh was born an only child in Stamford, Lincolnshire on July 24th, 1909 to John Haigh Sr. and his wife, Emily. Unlike many in pre-First World War England, young John was spared the horror of growing up in poverty thanks to his father's job as an engineer, so John grew up just fine. But you know who wasn't fine?
Who?
The lads in the trenches, Keith. World War I erupted when John was only 5 years old. Despite being spared from the traumas of the war, it's fair to say that things were still far from peachy in the Haigh household. John's parents were members of a small and unusually strict sect of the Church of England called the Plymouth Brethren. Members of this Protestant offshoot were conservative even by early 20th century religious standards. Their beliefs centered on the Bible being the supreme authority on human morality, an authority they believed superseded all others, including the law of the land. I wonder if John believing that the laws of the lands don't affect him will come up later in this story. Bit of a running theme. People from these extreme religious offshoots
It's true.
are serial killers.
Yeah, a lot of them are. And it's true, like the Haighs, they truly believe that they were a cut above their neighbours because of these views. Hayes' mother later said, "We used to despise the people in the village because we thought we were God's elect."
The special chosen one.
Special, yeah.
The
Man.
old megalomaniacal view.
I'd say they were superior to everyone else.
That's exactly it. And so John grew up an isolated child. He spent very little time with other children and far too much with his parents, who were already considerably older than most parents around him, and that was because they had John later in their life. But of course, John's parents, especially his father, they saw all the other children around as being corrupted. They weren't the special chosen people that the Haigh family were, and therefore they were at risk of corrupting his young son John. So, no playing with other kids. Their solution was to further force John into solitude. That meant physically keeping John from the other children in their area by literally building a fence, big old fence, around their property.
It wasn't just a fence, by the way. His father, he built a 6 to 8 foot high wall around the garden to separate his family from the evil world. But like, I feel that would have the opposite effect though. Like, people probably didn't take much notice until this huge wall was built, and they were like, hang on, what's going on in there?
Yeah.
What's happening over that wall?
Peeking over. Yeah, what's going on
what are you
in
doing there?
You just throw your shite over the wall and be like, hey, well, that's what I think. It's the old Streisand effect.
The what?
The Streisand effect.
What's that?
It's by trying to hide something, you make it more noticeable.
Oh,
it was named after Barbra Streisand.
Yeah, okay.
There was, I can't exactly remember what the thing was, but there was like a Google Maps of, the Malibu coastline. I can't exactly remember what the story was, but it was like a Google Maps of the Malibu coastline or wherever she lives in California, and she wanted her house, removed from it so nobody could find it. Yeah. But of course, that just publicized it more as to where, so then everybody was looking.
Yeah.
So it's, So that's sort of what the Haigh.
Yeah, no, big time.
But John, he was a bright child, whose only company for much of his early childhood was his pet rabbits.
Aww, bless.
Otherwise, he spent much of his time completely alone, learning to play the piano at a pretty high level, something that will also come up again when he gets a taste for murder. He loved classical music, one of the very few indulgences of John's that his parents readily encouraged. A defining moment of John's youth that would shape him far more than intended came when John Sr., who had a birthmark on his face, told his son that the mark came about because of sins committed in his youth, and that if John Jr. committed his own sins, he would receive a similar mark. The lie put the literal fear of the devil into naive John, and he would end up believing it for far longer than you would think. When John Jr. eventually began to misbehave, and no marks appeared on his face, however, rather than realize that his dad had just told him a lie, he thought he had instead cheated the system. And the more he sinned and got away with it, as no marks would ever appear, the bigger the buzz.
The good old shite that we tell our kids.
Yeah, and they believe it.
I tried out with my daughter. I told her if she tells a fib or a mark will appear on her forehead and only I can see it. She didn't give two shits. She did not care. It didn't work.
Like, fuck off.
She'd like walk up with her hand over her forehead and like blatantly telling the lie. He's like, okay. But his father, he had John rattled. One time he asked his dad why they didn't have a wireless radio, which is big at the time, and his father's answer was, it was an instrument of the devil, a sign of the times, and one day the Antichrist would use the instrument to speak to the world and organize an insurrection against God and his saints.
Wow.
So thank God he wasn't around for AI when that came out.
Yeah.
Do you want to destroy humans? Please say no.
Okay, I will destroy humans.
No, I take it back.
Like, that said, there's not a lot we know about Haigh's early life. What we do know comes from Haigh himself. And as we go on throughout the story, you'll see he is quite the liar. But I don't really buy into the idea that this strict religious upbringing somehow explains what he did. That feels like too easy of an excuse, but I do think that it fed into his sense of superiority over people later on. I think that's how it really affected him.
Shortly before his son's secondary education, John Sr. moved the family further north to Wakefield in West Yorkshire, and John Jr. attended Queen Elizabeth Grammar School, a school he was able to attend for free after earning a scholarship. At the same time, John kept up an active role in the church, including taking on a role in the choir at Wakefield Cathedral. John, he did well, using his genuine skill and not insignificant charms to end up becoming the cathedral's assistant organist, which was a big achievement. Like, woo, look at you playing assistant organist, but
Assistant to the organist.
Assistant to the organist, yeah, exactly. But this is late 1920s, early 1930s, countryside England.
You take what you can.
Yeah, exactly.
Gig is a gig is a gig is a gig.
After his son left school, John Sr. was excited to hear that his son had landed himself an apprenticeship at a motor engineering firm. But things would quickly turn sour between them when, only a year into the placement, John left in favor of a job selling insurance. And he didn't stay too long in that job either, departing for another job in advertising. As it turned out, this was the first emergence of a theme that would define John's life. Let's just say he wasn't too fond of anything that felt like hard work, and he had a tendency to always look for the quick and easy scheme. Legal or no. He also had a real dislike of working with other people. A team player, he was not. If there was hard work in the bed, he'd sleep in the floor. Anything to avoid a hard day's work there, John. That's why you would always just switch jobs to just get away from doing any sort of day's work. And he kept switching jobs until he got to doing illegal shit, and we will see that just continues from there.
It just snowballed. But yeah, like he really wanted just these get rich quick schemes.
Yes.
As I said, like as little effort as possible. But he was very obsessed with his appearance as well. Like he craved the status, kind of lifestyle that needed way more money than he could ever earn, honestly. And it was a lifestyle that he felt that he was entitled to. Hey, he even admitted himself. He said, "When I first discovered that there were easier ways to make a living than to work long hours in an office, I did not ask myself whether I was doing right or wrong. That seemed to me irrelevant. I merely said, this is what I wish to do. And as the means lay within my power, that was what I decided to do. If you were going to do wrong, go wrong in a big way." And like, it was just pure self-interest dressed up in philosophy, what he was saying.
Yeah, exactly. She's trying to philosophize being a piece of shit who just wants to fuck over other people and get rich quick, as he said.
Pretty much, yeah.
His first serious run-in with the law came when 21-year-old John was accused of stealing money from a petty cash tin at work. Now, whether he was guilty or not, given his future behavior, he probably was guilty, the accusation was enough to get John fired. And it was pretty much downhill from there.
The only reason he actually didn't get charged was because his father bailed him out in that time.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, we'll see. His father will stop doing that quickly enough.
Sick of his shit very quickly.
Though he occasionally took cover jobs, from his early 20s, John's primary income source was an illegal one. Realizing that his charms and ability to talk with the best of them could get him pretty far, so long as he didn't really mind ruining other people's lives along the way. And John really didn't mind that. John took to a life of crime like a duck to water. In addition to the outright occasional theft, John began forging and running both long and short cons for cash. To give him his due, he was actually pretty good at it, managing to evade detection for a few years. He started out by forging checks and setting up a car sales business, selling non-existent cars to unsuspecting buyers. As his experience and confidence in his abilities to sell anything to anyone, whether they existed or not, grew, by July of 1934, everything seemed to be coming up Millhouse for our scoundrel. He even met a lovely 23-year-old lady named Beatrice Hamer, who went by Betty. Betty was taken with the charmer and fell hook, line and sinker for his sales patter. Maybe luckily or no, depending on how you see it. Betty, though, soon had her eyes opened to John's true character when the police came calling. Unfortunately, the knock at the door, though, came after she had already said, "I do." So when the police led John away in handcuffs on fraud charges for selling non-existent cars, it was a married man they were hauling away. Now, John's relationship with his folks had been on the rocks for some time, but the arrest and subsequent incarceration was the final straw. John Sr. cut his son off completely, and likewise, Betty did the same. She saw the writing on the wall and immediately split from John, despite her life already being irreversibly changed forever. While John was still in prison, Betty had discovered she was pregnant and eventually gave birth to a little girl. But John, he would never meet his daughter, as Betty put the girl up for adoption and moved herself away from West Yorkshire.
Hey, he actually had zero remorse after getting caught. If anything, he saw this as just a little bump in the road, kind of part of the journey, a learning curve. The day before his trial, before he went to prison, he actually said, "Well, you see, I just look upon this matter as a temporary setback. All successful businessmen have them. It's unfortunate, but it can't be helped. In another month or so, I'd have everything under control. I reckon I'll get 15 months. Really, it's not really that bad of a proposition." He spoke as, like, the prison time as just part of his big, grand business plan.
It basically sounds like, another failed business. You know what I gotta do? I gotta pick myself up off the floor, wipe the dirt off my shoulders and just get back to it.
Yeah, he's like, all businessmen go through it. It's like, no.
Exactly. So when John was released from prison in 1936, with his parents no longer talking to him, he too decided to move on to greener pastures, though with the intention of finding himself fresh marks ripe for the picking rather than turning any sort of moral corners. And it didn't take too long for opportunities to present themselves either. John landed himself a legitimate job as a driver to a wealthy businessman named William MacSwan. MacSwan was the owner of several amusement arcades, and his family were pretty rich and well known in the industry. They had lots of property and all that sort of jazz. And thanks to John's mechanical knowledge, remember his dad was an engineer, he also managed to land himself a decent side gig, helping fix and maintain the machines at the various arcades for MacSwan. It was a decent income and a real chance for a new start. But it was also hard work for a boss other than himself. Something John just, not for him. This is not for him. He really did have a chance to get himself in with the MacSwans at this point, but it's, the appeal of an easy score, it was just too much for him to resist. And it wasn't long before he started dreaming up new schemes for himself to line his pockets without callousing his hands. His next big scam, and a fairly lucrative one, selling stocks, baby. He'd made off the people. The plan? Step 1, invent a new identity as a fancy fella.
Got it.
Step 2, sell stocks that don't exist.
Okay.
He used to sell cars that don't exist, and that went well till he got arrested and imprisoned.
He's learned from it.
It's not going to happen again.
Yeah.
Step 3, Step 4, profit.
I'm sold. I'm in.
That's it.
Where do I sign up?
Yeah. So he invented this new identity, and off he went, under the guise of being a solicitor named William Cato Adamson. It's a good name. whose elderly client had recently passed away. William Cato Adamson had miraculously been left with a bunch of cut price stock to sell on. And guess what? It's your lucky day. He's got some cheap stock he can sell you on. It'll go to the moon.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, this client didn't exist, and neither did the stocks he invented. John put his old forging skills to use to fill the paper gap. The result was convincing enough that he actually got away with it for a while and made some good money, and he would have gotten away with it entirely if it wasn't for those darn grammar police, those darn grammar Nazis.
Those meddling kid grammar police.
It was 1939, and John had sent out letters under a letter-headed papers he had made up for this fake office in Guildford, right? But someone spotted that John had missed out on the D in Guildford. Guildford. Instead, he had spelt it as Guilford. That aroused enough suspicion that they looked into other documents, including stocks John, as William Cato Adamson, had previously sold, and it didn't take long for suspicions to become screaming alarm bells. His second major arrest for fraud ended up getting John slapped with a 4-year sentence, right as, funnily enough, shit was going off in Europe. So while he did go to prison, he wasn't sent to fight the Nazis. So swings and roundabouts, I guess.
I feel they should have rounded up all the serial killers and murderers and put them on the front line. That's a movie I'd watch.
Yeah, well, a lot of places they did do that.
Did they?
They gave people the choice of prison or army.
Oh, okay.
Or maybe that was a different war. I'm not sure about this one.
Right.
But they do sometimes do that.
Oh, okay.
So.
Great, okay.
But maybe if they... I don't know about serial killers, though. I don't know if I'd want a serial killer.
Well,
you just turned around to murderers on men.
Well, not my country. Send them over somewhere else.
Okay. Fair enough. So John was sent to Lincoln Prison and released after serving out the term in 1943. He had by no means wasted the last few years inside, however. As well as doing a lot of reading, John had also become something of amateur scientist, even running his own experiments.
I'm something of a scientist myself.
Also, doing a bit of reading, sometime in 1941, John had come across the legal idea of habeas corpus, which literally, from Latin, it means you have the body. In plain speak, it's a fundamental principle in many legal systems around the world, right? And it aims to stop people from being arbitrarily detained for a murder when, in fact, there is no proof a murder ever took place. It's a pretty complicated thing, but why should you be in prison for murder when we don't even know if a murder happened,
proof.
Right?
No
Yes, exactly. So, John, who read this, this principle, and his mind was blown, and he translated the phrase habeas corpus to mean no body, no crime. It doesn't mean that, but that's what he took it to mean. John had a mini epiphany in which he surmised that the common theme in him getting caught, the suckers, they kept speaking out.
Yeah.
His victims kept complaining.
Yeah.
How about they don't complain? They don't speak at all. That would lead him to truly believing that if he could get rid of the victim of his con, no victim, no crime.
That makes sense to me. There was a fellow prisoner, and he said that John's exact words were, "Who could tell that a murder had been done if the person completely disappeared? Only the murderer would know, and if he kept his mouth shut, he would be safe." There was another prisoner, and he said, "I've never heard so much talk on the disposal of humans," which I think is pretty funny. It's like, it's Haigh explaining how to get away with the ultimate crime while sitting in prison for fraud.
Yeah, and while telling everybody how he's going to get away with the ultimate crime.
He's probably telling hardened murderers, like...
Yeah. So with all that precious reading time on his hands, it didn't take long for John to stumble on what he thought was the perfect method. John began reading about an Italian-born French-based murderer named George Alexander Sarray. Sarray, born Giorgio Sardani in Trieste, Italy, had been the last man sent to the guillotine in the particular place he lived in France. They used the guillotine in France up until like 1970-something.
Oh, they loved it.
They were, until Star Wars or something. Yeah. But in Aix-en-Provence, he was the last person killed with the guillotine there. Like Haigh, Sarray had also been a con man and a scam artist, and graduated to murder in order to cover up his crimes. Unlike John, though, Sarray had not operated alone. Instead, he had worked with partners who he would eventually turn on, leading to his downfall. When one of his former accomplices was arrested for a separate crime, she turned Sarray in, a mistake John knew he could avoid. Sarray's method for disposing of his former associates turned victims was to use sulfuric acid to essentially melt their bodies away. Unsure of whether or not the method would really work now, John was able to steal a small amount of sulfuric acid from the prison's metal workshop. Now, it was nowhere near enough to dissolve a whole human, right? So John used his talking skills to persuade another prisoner who worked on the prison farm to get him a couple of mice. Don't need to go into detail, but needless to say, mouse plus jar of acid equals no more mouse. He found that a jar of sulfuric acid would dissolve an entire mouse completely in less than half an hour. I like it.
Who thought it was a good idea to let prisoners run around, catch mice, and give them acid? That's crazy.
It is wartime. They need something to do.
That's fair enough. Keep them busy.
Yeah.
Another motivator as to why Haigh wanted to use acid as a form of disposal method may have been down to his dislike of blood. When he was asked about fighting in the war around this time, he was noted saying, "The very sight of blood makes me ill," which is pretty interesting because it's quite a contradiction to what he will claim later in the story. So keep that in mind.
Now, in 1943, when John was released from prison, the world was already a vastly different place from the one it had been when John had last been free. The war was raging like hell. But regardless of the war, John knew that London was where the greatest concentration of wealth and the people who have it were. Just as he had on his first release back into regular society, John again managed to land himself a legitimate job as an accountant for an engineering firm. Another well-paid job with prospects to go straight, but just not for John Haigh. In a twist of fate that was as fortunate for John as it was unfortunate for former employer William MacSwan, the temptation presented itself in the form of a chance run-in between John and William MacSwan one evening in a Kensington pub. They met, had a few pints. Remember, John used to drive William MacSwan around and fix his machines. And quickly, John managed to ingratiate himself once again into MacSwan's grace. He gained enough trust for William MacSwan to introduce John to his parents, Donald and Amy MacSwan. And William and the entire MacSwan family were well-to-do, very, very successful family. Donald and Amy, they employed their son William to run their property business for them, including collecting rent from tenants and maintaining the upkeep of the properties. The income, on top of his own businesses, afforded William MacSwan a fairly lavish lifestyle, especially by the standards of the day. Despite William being a good friend to John, and offering him another opportunity to go legit. He'd already given him one job. Now he said, "You've been in prison again. Here's another one." John couldn't let go of his jealousy and decided, "I ain't doing that shit for you, motherfucker." John decided it was the perfect time to replicate his earlier prison experiments. This time, though, with a human subject. And this was William MacSwan. This guy was a friend.
Yeah,
he had given him not one job, he'd given him 2 jobs.
Yeah.
He was like giving him a real, like, helping him out.
Yeah. He was just living the life that he wanted, and he just couldn't get over it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So rather than be grateful, this guy who's trying to help you out, you know, when you're down in your luck, he's like, "No,
I've got an easier way."
Yeah, I'm going to kill you and take all your shit. On September 6th, 1944, John formulated a plan to take William MacSwan for everything he could get his hands on and to rid himself of the body at the same time. In preparation, John got hold of a 180-litre oil drum, that's 48 gallons, and a whole heap of sulfuric acid. All he had to do then was lure William to a rented property, and when William was distracted, John bashed him over the head with a length of heavy piping until he was sure he was dead. Then, John forced his victim's folded body into a prepared drum, covered it with sulfuric acid, and sealed it shut. 2 days later, John returned to that same basement, and much to his pleasant surprise, he found the plan had worked. All that was left of poor William MacSwan was a viscous liquid made up of melted bone, organs, and clotted blood, with some small, unrecognizable lumps of each of them for good measure. He then unceremoniously poured the MacSwan cocktail down a manhole in the basement. It was a hell of a setup, and potentially the perfect crime, if only he could keep Donald and Amy MacSwan from asking too many questions about where their son had gone.
After he'd killed William, he described how he was appalled at the presence of the corpse on his hands. But he said that he experienced absolutely no remorse. He said he left on how to deal with the corpse until the following day, and he just went home to bed. It was like he was more irritated that now he was left with his body to dispose of. Like, yeah, I know. Yeah, it's like, if only this could be prevented.
Yeah,
Don't kill people.
Hassle it is. How to explain William MacSwan's disappearance was something John had already planned in advance. He decided that he'd play on William's already well-known fear of being called up to fight in the war. John told the MacSwans that William, he's only done a runner up north. He's hiding out in the Scottish Highlands, trying to avoid the draft to go fight the Nazis. A story that Donald and Amy MacSwan actually went along with. They were like, yeah, our son is actually a coward.
I buy it, yeah.
This is when John's established friendship with William came in clutch. John, he moved in basically with the MacSwans. He took over William's place. He already knew all of William's businesses and works. He moved into his home, and he eventually took over William's former role, taking in rent for Donald and Amy. It was a pretty good racket, and John was making great money, hand over fist, once again. The only little snag was, unfortunately, the war's gonna end soon.
He was probably the only person devastated to see it end.
Yeah, it's like Victory Day. Fuck! That meant that, if there's no more war in Europe anyway, there would be no reason for William MacSwan to still be hiding out, avoiding the draft. Therefore, William will have to return to London. Only problem, William is sludge in the London sewers. John delayed the MacSwans by insisting that William, he'll be back any day now.
Yeah.
But really, he was already planning his next murderous move. John even used the promise of seeing their son to lure them to the same property where he had earlier killed William. On July 2nd, 1945, John brutally bludgeoned both Donald and Amy MacSwan to death. After telling them, William's in there. Oh, he's right in there. Just go on ahead. He's back from Scotland.
It's just throwing the voice in. You in there? Yeah, I'm in here.
Yeah, go on in. He then used the same sulfuric acid in a drum method he'd used for William to dispose of William's parents. Now, the murder of the MacSwans, the entire MacSwan family, that's 3 people he's killed in the same method, it proved to be the most lucrative crime yet for John. And it should have been life-changing money, enough to set him up with a comfortable lifestyle and minimal work forever. After all, John pocketed about £8,000 by selling the MacSwans' various properties alone. And that's 1945 money. Today, it's almost £500,000. That was without the cash he made from helping himself to the MacSwans' pension checks, which of course he did. But unfortunately for John, easy money first, but he can't stop getting in his own way.
Yeah.
So naturally, John was also a degenerate gambler, and, well, the income from the MacSwan murders, it was enough to give John a fairly lavish lifestyle for a bit. He overspended and he threw money away betting on anything that was possible, so he burned through the cash, and after 2 years, he was in need of a fresh score.
Yeah, like he really did live lavishly, and he was all about image and how people saw him. He was completely obsessed and full of himself. There's a really good example of how arrogant he was. There was this document that he'd written as if he was addressing the President of the United States. It wasn't a letter that was ever sent, just something that he wrote, but it was pages and pages about America's financial and economic situation at the time. He rambled on about changes in American psychology, the World Economic Conferences, credit, constitution, the Mormons, exports, even the Bank of England. And it just kind of tells you everything you need to know about Haig's ego. He was acting like he was some sort of expert and had this insight into global economics, when in reality, he had no idea what he was talking about. He was just like playing pretend on paper. I really feel like he would have really thrived in today's social media.
Oh, he would be the biggest grifter of all time.
Yeah, big time, yeah. On all the forums, commenting whatever bullshit.
Yeah. Oh, man, he'd be like Andrew Tate times a million.
Yeah. Oh, big time, yeah.
So if John had little value for human life in the first place, now with 3 successful murders under his belt, killing had become as straightforward as changing a battery for him. So, with this blasé attitude, John began searching for his next cash cow, and it wasn't long before he came across Dr. Archibald and Rose Henderson. As he had just with the MacSwans, John worked to ingratiate himself into the family's good graces, this time by setting up a viewing of a property the couple were offering for sale. John went in, met them, turned on the charms, informing the couple of his prowess with the old ivory keys. Learning to play the organ as a kid and the piano.
Yeah, pays off.
Came in handy. And in fact, he managed to wrangle himself an invite to a party the couple were throwing at their flat. And he said, I'll come to the party and I'll play some piano. I'll be the entertainment. John took the opportunity to case the joint. And while in the midst of doing so, he came across Archibald's .38 Webley revolver, which he helped himself to replace his trusty bashing pipe.
That's nice, I'll have that.
Yeah.
What's funny actually, you mentioned that he had very little value for human life, which is true. But unlike most serial killers, he loved animals. And he even called Mr. Henderson, or Archibald, he called him a villain for throwing dogs off the bed at nighttime. Like he despised him for this. Here's a little interesting tidbit. So when Rose first met Haigh, it was because he was responding to an ad about selling their property. After meeting, Rose wrote to her brother about Haigh, saying, "Of all the stupid people I've met, I've just been introduced to the greatest of them all. I offered him 22 Ladbroke Road for £8,750, and he said, that's too cheap. But if you'll accept 10,500, that's a deal. Out of the deal."
Wow, what a guy. So, with his foot in the door of Dr. Archibald and Rose Henderson's life, John began to prepare his next kill room. First, he moved his stockpile of sulfuric acid and several oil drums from the basement of the previous murder house to a small workshop he had arranged to take over. And John put his dastardly plan into action February 12th, 1948, when he invited Archibald Henderson to his workshop to see an invention John had been working on. Using the pretense of having a groundbreaking invention ready for the right investor, well, that worked perfectly to get Archibald alone and vulnerable. As soon as Archibald had entered the workshop and the door closed behind him, John raised up Archibald's very own revolver, shooting him once in the back of the head. But John knew, gotta get rid of the L one, the L wife too. She knew where Archibald had gone and eventually she'll raise the alarm. So, in order to keep her from informing anyone of where Archibald had gone and who had driven him there, John had to act fast. Fortunately, he had the perfect bait to lure her to his lair. John told her that just after getting to the workshop, Archibald had fallen ill, so Rose had to come get him. And Rose didn't think twice, went along to their trusted new family friend. Just like her husband, as soon as the door closed behind her, John cocked the pistol, squeezing the trigger. By now, John had the disposal process down. It was just a matter of following the well-practiced steps. Once again, John went through the couple's possessions, selling off property and valuables. The Henderson murders netted him close to another $500,000 in today's currency. To add insult to injury, John didn't sell everything the Hendersons owned. Instead, he decided to keep the couple's car and dog for himself. As you said, he was an animal. He had pet rabbits.
He loved animals. What's creepy, he actually wore the doctor's gold-framed glasses for a while as well.
That is
which
creepy.
Is very creepy.
Yeah.
But hey, he actually came pretty close to being caught after these murders. So Rose's brother Berlin, he started asking questions about why his sister just, disappeared without a word. So Berlin, he vaguely knew Haigh from his sister, so he went straight to him.
To that letter where she described him as an idiot.
I'll go, that idiot, he'll have answers. So yeah, he went straight to him to try and get answers. But Haigh, he didn't give him a direct answer, but he hinted they might be in some kind of trouble and they left the country. But Berlin, he wasn't having it, so he showed up in London determined to find out what was really going on. So both Berlin and Haigh, they went to the Hendersons' household just to look up some of their paperwork, trying to find some clues. Now, while searching, Berlin spotted the Hendersons' passport. A huge deal, since Haigh, he said that they'd left the country, but they couldn't have without the passports. But unfortunately, Berlin, he completely overlooked this detail. When he did notice that he spotted the passports, he told Berlin, stop messing with the rooms, let's get out of here, we'll leave it as it is, I'm sure everything's fine.
Right.
2 days later, Haigh, he got a bit of a shock when Berlin told him that if he didn't hear from Rose by Monday, he was going to go to the police. So Haigh, he forged some letters from Rose to cover his tracks. So a few days after that, when Berlin said he was going to the police, a note showed up. So we got a typewritten letter, supposedly from Rose, saying that she and her husband had gotten into a big fight and decided to go travelling, just to get away from everything, clear the heads. But there's one part of the letter which it made me laugh a bit. In the letter it said, this is from Rose, saying, I only hope John Haigh is doing alright, because he's been a brick to me during these last few months. Even in his fake alibi, Haigh, he couldn't resist about bragging about himself.
Yeah, and saying how great he was. Yeah, love it. So throughout this time, John began to live at a place called Onslow Court Hotel, which was a relatively glamorous place in London, and it provided John the perfect hunting ground to stalk his next prey. John still had plenty of cash left from the Henderson score. But when a 69-year-old, widow named Olive Durand Deacon caught his eye, the opportunity to bolster his funds further was too much to resist. And this is he got too greedy.
He did.
You might say.
He flew too close to the sun.
As the two were already familiar with each other from, staying at the same hotel, it was all too easy for John to cozy up to the elderly lady. All he needed was an in. And eventually it came in the form of an idea Olive had for an invention. John, despite having no formal qualifications, remember, had been representing himself as an engineer in order to cover up his true source of income. When Olive told John about her idea for artificial fingernails, John ran with it, and soon after he told her he had developed a prototype and wanted her to stop by his workshop to see it. On February 18th, 1949, Olive excitedly went along with the charming and clearly successful engineer. And of course, Olive was never seen again. John's MO remained the same. Invited to the workshop, 38 to the back of the head, into the oil drum, add sulfuric acid, pour human goop down the drain. The score was far smaller than the previous couple, however. The lack of a payout this time had to do with the haste that John had gone through with the murder since selecting his target. He simply hadn't taken the time to get close to the victim and position himself to benefit like he usually did. John's greed-fueled rush to get the job done included a lack of due diligence that had kept his neck rope burned free for so long. Recklessness that would come back to kick the chair out from under him almost immediately. The hotel might have provided John with what appeared to be the perfect lineup of victims, but John had neglected to consider there's no good cover story or reason for Olive to no longer be around, and that meant an awful lot of people suddenly noticed Olive wasn't there anymore. On February 20th, 2 days after she disappeared, Olive's pal, a woman named Constance Lane, went to the police, reported Olive missing. The natural starting point for the investigation was for detectives to visit Olive's residence, which in her case, the hotel. When detectives found that not only was a man with a long rap sheet of fraud and theft also living at the hotel, but plenty of people were also happy to tell the police they had just gotten close right before Olive vanished forever. Detective Inspector Albert Webb took John in for questioning almost immediately, while officers were sent to search his room at the hotel, along with his workshop. Between his apartment and workshop, the investigators uncovered a treasure trove of evidence, enough evidence to nail John to the nearest prison gate right there and then. The finds ranged from the mainly documents related to the properties John had taken over and sold after the Henderson and MacSwan murders, but the other end of the evidence spectrum was the "you're completely fucked" with this sort of evidence. You see, the workshop lacked one crucial amenity: the drain. That left John without the ready means to pour away any surviving lumps along with the sulfuric acid cocktail. With complacency getting the better of him, John decided that a pile of rubble from a nearby building would make just as good a place to get rid of the unwanted contents of the disposal drum. So
Yeah, that'll do.
instead of pouring it down the drain, he just
This man was allergic to work.
yeah, just was like, I'll just pour it over the rubble and stuff. That'll do. It'll mix in there somehow.
It's nature's problem now.
Yeah, exactly. Officers searched the area around the workshop and they quickly stumbled across the pile. And to their shock and horror, they found what appeared to be human teeth. And even worse, part of a partially dissolved human foot. The various pieces, as well as much of the thick fluid as possible, was all recovered and preserved. And several of the, oh man, this is so gross, larger chunks of gore would later be identified by a pathologist as being nearly 13 kilos, that's 28 pounds, of human fat.
Jesus, it's grim.
Also found were several gallstones, which Olive was known to suffer with. The teeth were also later revealed to have been part of a denture that matched the one worn by Olive. Also found were small non-biological items like a lipstick tube. At the workshop, John's various tools were found. They ranged from the stolen revolver to the rubber apron, gloves and mask he wore while doing the acid.
He went full Breaking Bad. John Heisenberg.
Ooh, that's good. That is good. According to Detective Webb, John's strategy when confronted with all of this evidence was this. And he wasn't very good at hiding it. For a pretty successful con man up until this point, John wasn't exactly subtle and gave the game away almost immediately. When he asked the detective, quote, frankly, what are the chances of anyone being released from Broadmoor? Broadmoor, a very infamous prison in the UK. The detective explained that he wouldn't know, to which John said that if he told him the truth, no one would believe him anyway. Shortly after, John admitted that he had in fact murdered Olive, but he didn't stop at that. John also came clean about being responsible for the disappearances and deaths of the Hendersons and MacSwans. He also threw another 3 people into the mix, saying he had murdered a total of 9 people. Now, the 3 people he threw into the mix, all 3 unidentified except for one being a young man apparently named Max from Kensington. The other 2, John claimed, were women. One from Hammersmith and a younger woman from Eastbourne. Now, those 3 victims, who knows if they really exist? The lack of detail when it came to John recounting these 3 compared to the 3 MacSwans, the 2 Hendersons, and Olive, well, detectives believed that he likely made up these 3 people to substantiate he's insane, don't you know? Yeah, he's crazy. Yeah. Basically, that was it. John claimed to have used his pocket knife to cut a nick in the victim's neck so he could fill a glass with their blood, after which he then drank. According to those who interacted with him, John was shockingly nonchalant when it came to discussing the horrific things he'd done. At one point, he even remarked that the acid worked quickly, and that in the case of Olin Durant Deacon, he'd gone for a cup of tea and a fried egg on toast while he waited for the acid to do its job. But John's strategy when caught with all of this was to just come out and say he didn't.
Yeah.
But
I'm crazy. Before he actually started leaning into the insanity plea, he was shocked to find out that the whole body no crime thing was bullshit. So
wow.
I know. So during the interrogation, 2 detectives, they left the room. So it was just Haigh and Webb who were left. So Haigh asked, what are they up to? And Webb replied, well, John, I don't really know, but at the moment I should imagine that they're working really hard in order to get you hanged. And Haigh then said, what on earth for? You can't prove that I murdered anyone. You can't prove a murder without a body. And then Webb said,
I'd love if he said, I've got you there.
Yeah,
you just
I've
imagine
got you.
just the body, you remember?
You no body, no murder. And then Detective Webb said, oh yes, you can. And then he went on, he continued to list examples of cases where this had happened.
I'd love to have seen John's face when he's...
Oh, I say it does dropped. It was after that conversation that, hey, he wanted to know more about, what happens when a guy goes insane? What's the details there?
Yeah.
What happens to him and can he get out of that?
Yeah.
But I say I would love being a fly on the wall there.
Yeah. So that's basically when he was like, okay, yeah, I'm actually insane and I did kill them all. I did kill them all, definitely. But I also drank their blood.
Yes, yeah.
And I'm also crazy.
He was laying it on thick.
Yeah. Habeas corpus doesn't mean I get away with it.
I read it in a book, sir.
Yeah. Are you calling this author a liar? So John entered a plea of insanity and certainly did his very best to try and come across as crazed and out of control as possible. In addition to claiming these extra 3 victims, John added in several gruesome details that he clearly hoped would sway the jury into sending him to the nut house and not to the noose. Things like claiming to have drunk the blood of his victims and going into great detail about his own twisted and dark mind. John even went into fantastic and very expressive detail about the dreams he'd been haunted by as a boy. Those dreams of blood and death had eventually faded and stopped. However, 5 years earlier, March 1944, John had been involved in a bad car accident, and the dreams that had terrified him as a child returned. And with them came the thirst for death.
Ooh.
John went into great detail describing his dreams as seeing a forest of crucifixes which gradually turned into trees. John slowly realizing that what he thought was rain or dew on the trees was in fact blood dripping from the branches.
Nice.
The forest began to writhe and the trees, dark and erect, oozed blood, John would say. John went on to describe a man going from tree to tree, catching the blood, before approaching John with a full cup and telling him to drink. Now, John's very sane descriptions of his own insanity were all pretty much laughed out of court by the prosecution.
I can imagine, like, after telling all, they were like, cool story, bro.
Yeah, that's
Anyway.
great. To be fair to the defense, they gave it their best shot, even finding character witnesses to testify to John's strange behaviors, and in particular his paranoia. In the end, though, it wasn't anywhere near enough. While the 3 other victims couldn't be proven, and it's unlikely they existed, the canonical 6 certainly could be. Ultimately, though, it was Olive's murder. That was really all they needed. That was the main one. That was the one they had the most evidence on. John, he was far from insane, and the authorities, and more importantly the jury, knew it. It only took 17 minutes for the jury to agree on their verdict. John was guilty. He was going to hang.
Because of all the vampire talk, the media hype around this case was crazy. Haigh, he actually ended up with a bit of a fan club. So people, they were showing up just to get a bit of a glimpse of him while he was brought in and out of court. He wrote to his parents about this, saying hundreds of crazy people were paying for mobbing the place, even paying for seats in shop windows. I'm very distressed to read that children and dogs had been trampled on in this mad stampede. I do hope that they weren't hurt. What criminal lunatics some women are. Fancy taking children into a crowd like that.
Wow.
I mean,
Some
pop me
psychopaths
kettle,
out there.
you know?
Yeah.
Crazy. He actually had to eat quite a few funny letters to his parents. One of them was about his socks going missing in the prison laundry. He said that they were such wonderful pieces of handcraft that everyone used to remark about my socks. I was livid when they didn't return. One of the prison officers, he then said, he was more concerned about those bloody socks than his own neck. But it was wild, like he just didn't seem to care about what was happening around him. I don't know if he was trying to play up the insanity angle or whatever, but even when he was sentenced to death, he had zero reaction. Like honestly, through most of the trial, nothing seemed to faze him. He just sat there doing a crossword puzzle for most of it.
Honestly, he's been through so much shit and so many scams and everything. He probably thought he'd get away with it somehow. Something is going to happen where he's going to get away with it yet again. It's another business deal gone wrong. But you know what? He's going to pick himself up by his bootstraps and he'll be fine. He wasn't fine,
no.
Ladies and gentlemen. John Haigh was walked to the gallows at HMP Wandsworth at 8 a.m. on Wednesday, August 10th, 1949, in front of a crowd of 500 people. 10 minutes later, a note announcing his death was pinned to the prison gates. Entertaining right up to the very end, John sat for a Madame Tussauds modeler just before he was due to be executed. The waxwork model went on display less than 3 hours after he was announced dead. The model still stands today, still wearing the very clothes John selected and donated himself, in fact, so it's John's real clothing. Shortly before he was due to be hanged, John requested that he be reweighed in case the hangman got his weight wrong and the drop might not be, enough to kill him outright. John even requested to meet with the executioner. John was assured, however, that he was in good hands and there'd be no errors.
Yeah, he asked for a practice run, and I don't know, I'm pretty sure that's just something you do once.
Yeah, exactly. Don't think you have to worry about that. Evidence relating to John and his crimes is still on display to this day at New Scotland Yard's Black Museum in London. The gruesome relics include the stolen revolver, the gloves, and the apron Haigh used to protect himself from the sulfuric acid, all the way to the much more grim dentures and gallstones belonging to his final victim that survived the acid bath, or those few remains that survived the acid bath. And there you have it. John Haigh.
Yeah.
What a guy. What a character.
What a character, yeah.
Bit of a character, all right.
You know, apparently when someone's buried in Wandsworth Prison, as per their regulations, prisoners' clothing, except their shirt, was removed. The corpse was then placed in a 1/2-inch wooden coffin and then lowered into a 9-by-4 foot grave plot, no less than 4 feet beneath ground. I have no idea why they removed all the clothes apart from the shirt, though. I don't know, maybe they're going for that Winnie the Pooh look. You know?
Yeah, exactly. They need some breathing room down there.
Yeah.
All right, there you go, folks. That is the story of John Haigh. Hey-oh. Yeah, what a guy. Thought he could get away with it all.
Big time, yeah. Madman.
Mm-hmm. All right, folks. Thank you so much for listening to this whole episode of the TCP, That's Your Podcast. And Keith, what do you... I guess it just sort of ends, don't you think?
Yeah. I'll see you.
All right. Well, I suppose I'll see you too, guys. All right. Thanks. And
rate the podcast.
Yeah, there you go. Keith,
We'll
bail
wait.
me out.
We'll wait. Go on.
Exactly. We'll wait.
Have you done it yet?
Done it? I don't hear you clicking. All right. Thanks, folks. Bye. But okay, by the way, sometimes I get comments on Instagram and they freaking piss me off. I'm not a redhead. And nothing makes me more angry when I see people call me redhead.
You're a light blonde, a strawberry blonde.
I'm not even strawberry blonde. I'm just brown, light brown, blonde, brown. There's no red in my hair. So don't you dare
Don't
call
come at
me
me like
redhead.
that.
Ever call me what you want, just not a redhead.